Okay, it looks like we did it right on time. It's always a lot of information to share. So we do have our next presenter here. And so I am really excited to have Cheryl Casey here. She is our open education librarian at the University of Arizona, where she leads OER initiatives and manages UA's Pressbooks Network. She's also an instructor for Open Education Network Certificate in the OER librarianship. So has amazing experience. I actually heard Cheryl's presentation when I first started at the OER conference. I think it was October or November. And it just brings a wealth of information and experience. So I thought it would be great for her to be here to share that knowledge with all of you. So with that, I will pass it off to you, Cheryl. Thank you so much for being here. We truly appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much, Megan. And congratulations on this awesome project. Community colleges have really led the way on OER initiatives, so kudos to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to stop my video just to try to preserve some bandwidth. Let me know in the chat if I start breaking up. Hopefully everything will go super smoothly. All right. Since sharing is a core value of open education, these slides are available for you to reuse and customize. I also want to acknowledge that the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples, with Tucson being home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. And I want you to leave here today equipped with a hefty toolbox for your OER projects and open pedagogy projects. There won't be time in this hour to cover everything about OER, but this online toolkit should give you additional resources and ideas. And it's licensed CC BY, so you can adapt it. And thank you, Megan, for putting the link in the chat. So I want to talk by just delving briefly into why expensive course materials are a problem. And basically, this came from Spark and their inclusiveaccess.org website, which is Inclusive Access are automatically billed course materials. Students can't learn from books they can't afford. And I was in a webinar recently where a student was describing how they had to change their major because they couldn't afford the course materials in their desired major. And that just breaks my heart to hear that. So OER, solve some of these problems with expensive course materials. And you've probably seen this survey from Florida Virtual Campus before. Of course, we don't want any of these negative impacts on students. A few years ago during Open Education Week, I asked our students to complete the phrase, if I didn't have to buy textbooks, I could ... And here were some of their responses. Actually pay rent on time, live again and get sleep, survive, buy groceries. I like how they added hashtag the struggle, eat food, not work until 3 a.m. before school. Another said not have debt-induced panic attacks. Students shouldn't have to choose between textbooks and food or rent, but they do. And this is where you can come in. You can make a difference for students. OER are free to use, keep, share, and print. I think it's important to focus on the why with this work because it can be it can be work, significant effort to create these fabulous resources. And so it helps to remember why we're doing this. And I'd like you to type your responses in the chat. What led you to get involved in the Open Textbooks for Rural Arizona project? And as you type your response, I'll just share my why. As a mom to 2 current college students and a future grad student, I just feel passionate about student success. I've seen my own kids spend a lot of time and effort trying to find the lowest cost course materials and order things from Amazon Marketplace that they don't get until the class has already started. I want education to be accessible and inclusive. And I'm involved in the student basic needs work on campus. And so, we see the horrible statistics about food insecurity. And I really think course materials should be part of student basic needs. Oh, thank you. I love these responses coming in. To save students money, more accessible, quick access on day one. Yes. Remove barriers. Yes. Take the class without worrying about money, equity, a lot of cost issues, available to everyone. Yes. Oh, Kylie, I was raised by a librarian. So I was raised with the belief that information should be shared and equally accessible to all. I love that answer. It feels right. Yeah, these are great answers. Thank you for sharing. And Catherine posts about the customizability aspect, having a book that teaches the way you want to present the material. Stacy says, tired of dealing with publisher broken promises and increasing prices. Yes. Excellent. Thank you all for those responses. So as we talk about OER, I want to start with a common understanding of what OER are, because I'll sometimes have faculty say, oh yeah, I'm using OER, but it will turn out to be a library licensed ebook or sometimes even a pirated textbook. So this is the definition of OER from UNESCO. And the key phrases here are teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, in the public domain, or under an open license that permits access, no cost access, use, and adaptation with no or limited restrictions. So OER encompass a wide range of material types, from test questions to videos, to textbooks, to full courses. So to qualify as OER, the resource not only has to be free to use, it also needs to give users the freedom to do what we call the 5 R's. So the first R is retain, which means they can keep a copy. They can download it, they can duplicate it. It's not like a book that you borrow from the library where you have to return it or the digital copy just suddenly goes poof and disappears. You can reuse it a number of times, as much as you want, in a variety of ways. You can revise it, which means you can modify or translate. You can remix it. You can combine it with other OER or your own self-authored materials and mash it up into something new. And redistribute means that you can share copies. So you nailed a lot of these benefits of open education in your comments. The cost savings, the customizability, day one access, equity and social justice, the sharing and collaboration. I want to emphasize, the open licenses really foster that sharing and collaboration and building upon each other's work. Diversity and inclusion is an important one. OER can include diverse voices and viewpoints and examples that are often missing from commercial textbooks. I think innovation is another key point of OER. I'm seeing more multimedia OER that offers students a hands-on immersive learning experience. I think the academic freedom for faculty is another selling point. OER expand the course material options available to faculty. You're not limited to what the commercial textbook publishers can provide, and you can customize. And last but not least, the student success angle. A growing number of studies show that students who use OER perform as well or better than students whose faculty assigned commercial textbooks. And I've listed several papers and reports under research in the toolkit. The number one question I get is where to find OER. There's no central repository for OER, so it's a bit of a treasure hunt. These are just some of the sites where OER can be found, and all of these are listed in the toolkit. In the next several slides, I'll walk through some of my favorite OER sources. For college textbooks, the Open Education Library is the first place I personally look. It's run by the Open Education Network, which is, and the library is celebrating its 10th birthday. It recently exceeded 1,000 open textbooks. Most have faculty authored reviews, and it also lists textbooks in development, so you can see what's coming soon. One of my favorite new OER search tools is the Pressbooks directory, which launched in 2020. It currently features more than 3,300 books across 115 Pressbooks networks. If your institution uses Pressbooks as a publishing platform, this is a great place to find content that you can clone and customize. It also features curated collections like the interactive OER and healthcare. So yeah, it's a fabulous, and I think the search functionality works really well in the Pressbooks directory. OpenStax is my favorite publisher of OER, and I heard Megan say that this is linked from your OER Commons Hub. So this is a project out of Rice University, and for classes in science, math or statistics, business, economics, US history or government, psychology, anthropology, or sociology, it's a great option. The 2E and the 3E on these covers mean these are second and third editions. And in 2020, OpenStax announced $12.5 million in new grant funding that will allow it to more than double the number of books it offers to 90 titles. So new books are planned for nursing, engineering, technology, liberal arts, science, math, and business. So what I love about OpenStax is that the books come in a lot of different formats that give users choice. The online versions are always free to use. Many titles have free Kindle versions. Most also have free Bookshare versions that can be used by people who are blind or have low vision. Excuse me, I'm going to mute myself and cough just. Allergies. If a student wants a print copy, our campus bookstore can sell full color books for about $25 to $50, even less for used copies. And each OpenStax book comes with free resources for faculty, like PowerPoint slides and solutions to end of chapter problems. Each one has an OER Commons Hub where faculty can exchange resources that they've created to go with the book. This anatomy and physiology book also has course cartridges for multiple learning management systems, as well as an annotated video guide. OpenStax has also added guided lecture notes, diversity and representation development guidelines, editable Google Docs and Google Forms, and testable images. That's where images from the book have their labels covered so that they can be used for quizzes and tests. So to access the instructor-only content, you just need to create an instructor account. OpenStax will verify your instructor status, and this is to prevent students from getting access to the answers. Yeah, so OpenStax also has low-cost courseware available for instructors who want courseware to do testing or homework or adaptive learning. And so they partner with a variety of technology companies to make these an option. Megan mentioned OER Commons and your hub there, so I won't go into that in much depth. LibreTexts is another great resource. It's an OER project based at the University of California, Davis. And in 2018, they received a $5 million grant from the US Department of Education. So LibreTexts features nearly 400 textbooks, text maps, and LibreTexts, as well as free interactive tools, Spanish language materials, and an OER remixer. It also has a workforce library. For other vocational education resources, Skills Commons is a great site. The US Department of Labor invested $1.9 billion in this OER project that's managed by CSU, Long Beach, and Merlot. And I understand that there's another call for new materials out. In this round, more than 700 institutions contributed content, which covers things like construction, manufacturing, healthcare, IT, and more. For language learning, I recommend Chorale, the Center for OER and Language Learning at the University of Texas at Austin. It offers materials in the languages listed here in the lower left corner. Since there's no central repository for OER, there are several different mega search tools available. Oasis is my favorite. I like the user-friendly interface. It allows you to browse by content type, like videos, podcasts, learning objects. You can also browse OER by subject. And we have the Oasis search box embedded on our OER page on the library website. So it searches 114 different sources. Google Advanced Search is another way to find OER using this usage rights filter. You can select free to share or free to use, share or modify, even commercially. That will find content that's licensed CC BY or in the public domain. Google has a separate advanced image search as well that lets you search by CC license, but not for a specific license. They changed that a couple years ago. You can also use Google Advanced Image Search to filter by color, region, image type, and other facets. So if you're trying to find images for an OER work or your course, these are great tools. Creative Commons recently rebranded its new CC search for images as Openverse, and they've expanded it to include more than images. With this, you can filter for a specific Creative Commons license or for public domain content. And I really like how this tool generates the image attribution for you in the tassel format that's recommended, the title, author, source, and license. So that's a a helpful tool as well. For OER by discipline, I like BC Campus's OER by discipline directory. They've done a good job of keeping it regularly updated. They also just announced this new tool called Adoption Finder. And this is, it lists open textbooks used at colleges, institutes, and universities in British Columbia. So some of these may have a Canadian focus. BC Campus has been very good at releasing Canadian versions of open textbooks produced in the US. But it may help with an initial search for OER in your subject area. And I've mentioned Creative Commons several times now, and just want to give you some more information about Creative Commons and how it works. We find that people don't get much training in this. I know I went through an entire library school degree without learning about Creative Commons or enough about copyright. So yeah, once people find OER, the next question. Oh, hello. Did you have a question? Okay. So the next question I usually get is, okay, now what can I do with the OER that I've found? And understanding Creative Commons licenses is the key to answering that question. So Creative Commons licenses debuted in 2002, and they're a set of free public licenses that have been broadly adopted around the world.
That just says that you received it. Is that, I don't know what a bill of lading is.
Yeah, thank you. If you could mute yourself, that would be great. So while copyright is all rights reserved, Creative Commons is some rights reserved. And Creative Commons licenses work with copyright to enable creators to share as many or as few rights as they choose. And there are over 2 billion digital works available with Creative Commons licenses, and the number is growing all the time. So if you can decipher Creative Commons licenses, you'll know exactly what creators have given you the rights to do. So these are the 4 different building blocks. Megan mentioned BY, or attribution, the one with the person. So this license lets you distribute, remix, tweak, and build upon someone's work, even commercially, as long as you credit them for the original creation. NC stands for non-commercial. You can't use someone else's work for commercial advantage or monetary compensation. This applies for both for-profit and non-profit users. And this element causes some confusion in public education spaces because I've had the question, will I charge for tuition? Does that mean I can't use an NC licensed Creative Commons work in my course? And the answer is no. In fact, you can even sell print copies of NC licensed works as long as they're at cost and you're not making profit off of them. SA, the reverse arrow, stands for share alike. And if you make changes to the content, you must license your new creation under the identical terms. And ND stands for no derivatives. So you can use all or part of the content, but if you make any changes to it, you can't reshare it. So those building blocks can be combined in these 6 different ways. So notice that they all have BY, they all have attribution. CC BY, which is one of the licenses that's required by your grant, is the least restrictive, and it makes it easiest for downstream users to remix and reuse your work. CC BY NC ND is the most restrictive. And anything with ND in the license is not considered OER because remember, revise and redistribute are 2 of the 5 R's, and those aren't allowed by the ND element of a Creative Commons license. Content that has ND in the license is still free to use. For example, TED Talks use the CC BY NC ND license. And Megan had mentioned CC BY non-commercial as the other license required by the grant. So these top 2. It's important to choose a license carefully. Once you release content under that license, I tell people you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. You can change your mind on a license, but it won't apply to previously released content. And there's a famous example with a textbook publisher called Flat World Knowledge, where they initially released OER under a CC BY license and then changed their business model. And they wanted to start charging people for the content. But all of the content that they had already released under CC BY can still be used with that license. So my colleagues at the University of Minnesota had scooped up a bunch of that content and continued to make it available. Even more flexible than a CC BY license is content that's in the public domain. And works in the public domain are free of copyrights and have no restrictions on use, although it's always good practice to attribute. So generally, if a work was first published in the US in 1927 or earlier, it's in the public domain. On January 1st, 2022, a bunch of new films, books, and music entered the public domain, including Winnie the Pooh, Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, sound recordings, and silent films with Buster Keaton and Greta Garbo. Actually, I should correct myself. If a work was first published in the US in 1926 or earlier, it's generally in the public domain. That year changes each year. So Creative Commons offers these 2 different tools for marking content that's in the public domain. This first one allows you to mark other people's work that's free of copyright, and sometimes museums will use this. CC0 allows creators to waive all the rights to their work and place their own work in the public domain. And sometimes you'll see funders requiring CC0 on data sets. Wrong way, sorry. There are entire courses on CC licenses and copyright if you want to learn more. A fairly new resource to be aware of is this Code of Best Practices in Fair Use for OER, which provides guidance in evaluating whether you can use third-party copyrighted materials in OER. Sometimes you can use the fair use exception to copyright to make a case for using that in OER. You can also ask the creator for permission. So there are a lot of different ways you can incorporate other people's content into your OER. I often get questions about accessibility, and I heard Megan emphasize accessibility checks for the OER you'll be creating. BC Campus offers an accessibility toolkit, and in its open textbook collection, there are tags on the books that it has deemed as accessible. So about 149 of the 400 textbooks in its collection have been approved as accessible and have that little tag. I also sometimes get questions about quality. If it's so great, why are people giving OER away? Millions of dollars have been invested in OER creation by philanthropic groups, the federal government, states, colleges, and universities. I let people know that publishers like OpenStax and Milne Open Textbooks use a formal peer review process, just like commercial publishers do. Sites like the Open Textbook Library, OER Commons, and Merlot offer user reviews. So here you can see there are 56 reviews for this public speaking textbook. All have names attached to them and institutions. So you can log in and see which, or you don't have to log in. You can go to the website and see which, what your peers think of particular textbooks. I also want to touch on open pedagogy as a method for developing OER. This is involving students in the creation of open educational resources. So rather than doing disposable assignments, students can engage in deeper and more active learning and contribute to the world's knowledge commons. So there are lots of different ways to practice open pedagogy, creating textbooks or videos or test banks, podcasts, blogs, translating content, converting complicated, hard to understand concepts into easier to understand infographics. Some students at the U of A did a series of infographics trying to persuade people to get the COVID vaccine. There are also Wikipedia projects where students can add additional sources to Wikipedia entries, create more diversity in Wikipedia entries, and just do some great work making those more factual and up to date and diverse. This is an example of an open pedagogy project at the U of A and our first textbook project in our Pressbooks platform. So the professor did a fabulous job. She's in our iSchool, and she gave students a lot of autonomy in whether they wanted their work included and how they wanted to be attributed. So if they wanted to be anonymous, that was okay. If they wanted just their first name or their full name, she gave them that choice. And she also gave them the choice to keep their work copyrighted, all rights reserved, and not have it included. And she made it clear to them that their grade would not be affected by their choice. So students created audio clips, video clips, graphics with their profile pictures. They used the glossary feature of Pressbooks to create glossary terms like hype beast. And it's just a really great project. And as part of my sabbatical project last year, I surveyed students about their experience doing open pedagogy and using Pressbooks. And we got some really nice feedback about, I like how it puts student voices out in the world, made us feel like our opinions and our voices were heard and appreciated for the first time. Gave me more incentive to make sure my assignments were my best product. I felt like I learned more, had more motivation, and more classes should be like this. And I just pulled these numbers last night and was blown away by the total page views that this book has gotten just since January 1st. Somehow 303 page views in the last hour. We know that it's been adopted at UC Boulder. The site traffic #1 comes from Michigan State University, so we believe it's been adopted there, and also from the Open Textbook Library and Google. So the impact that you can make with your open textbooks is huge. It can, once it's discovered, people all over can adopt it and use it. There are a number of resources available to help you create and customize OER. These are just a few of the guides and toolkits available. So this is why my takeaway message to you, I know I've covered a lot of ground, but my takeaway message is that you can do this. You can make education more affordable, more accessible, and more inclusive. And I'd like you to take some time now to just a few seconds to think of one action that you can take in the next week or two. I attend a lot of conferences and I get all fired up and excited, but then I lose the momentum and I don't always follow up on something that, you know, oh, I was going to go look at that website, or oh, I was going to go contact this person. So at a textbook affordability conference I attended, they had us actually write down things that we plan to do, and then they mailed them to us and said, hey, have you done this yet? Which I thought was a great idea. So if you feel comfortable sharing one thing you plan to do, go ahead and put it in the chat. Otherwise, you can, you know, write down a note to yourself, maybe put a reminder in your calendar. So I just want you to pounce on those opportunities while they're fresh on in your mind. Ooh, embed the OASIS search tool. Yes, in the OpenText website. Yeah, it's a really nice search interface. Erin says, ask content experts at my school what resources they like. Add them to our library website. Research guides, fantastic. Dwayne says, review the hub in OER Commons and see what's there. Luke says, I'm going to make sure all those amazing resources are included in my OER LibGuide and start to create some guidance for faculty on student-generated OER. Yes, and feel free to adapt what's already out there. You know, if you go to the Open Pedagogy section in our Pressbooks website, which is linked in the slides, you know, feel free to adapt any of the content that you find there. The OER community is so fabulous about sharing resources and being supportive to each other and helping each other out. Yeah, looking at resources to see what's available. Michael says, review the code for fair use. It's a really powerful tool to expand what we can incorporate into OER. And one of our lawyer colleagues who worked on it said, you know, fair use is like a muscle. You need to exercise it to be able to keep it strong. Nathan, yeah, look for OERs on environmental topics. Highly recommend starting with Pressbooks directory and the Open Textbook Library. Sandy brings up an excellent point that a lot has been created in just the last 2 years. Every time I do this presentation, there are more and more resources in the various sites, and new content is being developed all the time. Yes, Wei says student-generated OER is co-curricular activities, and Erin gives a plus to that. Ah, Mary, thank you. Sharing resources back with people who weren't able to join today. Stacy says, put it on the calendar to review today's recording. Andrea says, encourage as many adjuncts as I can to make the move next semester to free low-cost resources like Desmos and Lumen. Tony's going to look for resources for classes. And Ali says, review the copyrights on a current OER text to determine what I need to make it more specific to my college. That may mean review the license and looking to see how you can customize it. Yes, Yes, that's fantastic. Yeah. I wish more people got training in the Creative Commons licenses so that they know how powerful those are for customization. You know, one thing about the commercial textbooks is that the production schedule is like 3 years often. And so by the time they're released, our nursing faculty have complained they're already out of date. But with OER, you can include up to the minute information by customizing. Okay, well, we have 10 minutes left, I believe, for questions. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. So much information. I see all these amazing chats. I know there was 2 questions in the chat, and I'm trying to find them because there's they happened in the middle of the presentation. I think it was Thatcher. You had one question. Oh, here it is. So Thatcher had a question saying, do you think the code for OER fair use is ready to be implemented, or are those ideas in the beta stage?
No, they are ready to be implemented. And I know some of the folks involved in creating that resource, and they're attorneys and very smart people. The content has really been vetted, and they have done a lot of presentations in the last few years to encourage people to use that resource. So yeah, I have great confidence in that resource.
Okay, and then Michael put a question in, are there brighter lines in the code than standard fair use?
I am not entirely sure what that means. Than standard fair use.
Michael, do you want to clarify?
Hi, Cheryl. This is Mike from the library.
Oh, hi.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. So I was just, this is the first time I heard about the code in this capacity, and I'm just wondering, is this to use copyright terms, a derivative of standard fair use, the United States Code, and if so, do you get more granular? Like, for example, one of the 4 factors of fair use is amount. And so everybody wants that bright line, right? Like 10 pages or 1 chapter or hard numbers associated with copyright. And I'm just wondering if this new code actually does something like that, like, puts in hard numbers.
Thank you for clarifying. And the answer is no. They very definitely emphasize that those numbers are not real. My library uses them because they need some kind of guideline for our document delivery service. But they emphasize that those numbers are the 10% rule that you sometimes hear, 1 chapter or 10%. They say there's no legal basis for that number, and that the amount, sometimes it can be the entire work. If you're talking about a poem, someone would need to use the entire poem to analyze. If it's an upcoming novel that an author is releasing that has, a secret bit of information that everybody's waiting to hear, if you were to share those few sentences, that could violate fair use, because that's the heart of the work, and it would be harmful to the author's ability to make money if you revealed the biggest juiciest part of the book. So right, the answer is that no, there are no hard and fast limits on percentages or anything like that. Yeah, right. Yeah. Dumbledore dies. Yes, Yes. That would be a stinky thing to share. Any other questions? I'm curious if you have used any of these OER sites before and have a favorite. OpenStax, yep, fantastic. Yes, OpenStax and its suite of resources for instructors are really the closest equivalent to the commercial publisher's course in a box, with the PowerPoint slides and the videos. And I recently had an instructor come to me really frustrated with a commercial publisher because she had assigned the digital textbook that was supposed to have accompanying videos, and then found out that the publisher was charging a courseware fee for access to those videos. So the students not only had to buy the digital textbook, but they also had to pay the courseware fee to see the videos. And she said, I'm done with that. The OpenStax Intro to Business book has the same content in the same order, and the videos are free and the PowerPoint slides are free. Yes. Oh, good. Dwayne says, considering a text from the Open Textbook Library. Yeah, and the reviews are super helpful there. Thatcher, I see a hand raised.
Hi, Cheryl. Thanks again. I liked your presentation when I saw you down in Mesa at the Arizona OER Fest a few years ago.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I was just thinking about in licensing, you know, it's clear in one way, and then there are unclear places like fair use. I mean, OER is it's a nice bright line, as Mike says, like it's either licensed this way or not in one sense, and that makes the difference. And then there are other places like there's educational sites, global something that a lot of people utilize, including Lumen, which are not technically CC licensed. They have their own terms of use, which are almost, functionally equivalent, but they're not CC licensed, right? So it's not strictly an open license. Pixabay is another place that is a resource so many people use.
Yep.
And they have a terms of use, which is almost equivalent really to public domain. So what is your feeling about those sorts of gray area terms of use licenses?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a Pixabay slide in this presentation. I love Pixabay. And you're right, it is close to a CC0 license. So it does enable free use, even for commercial purposes, and it doesn't require attribution. But like I said, it's always best practice to do that. So yeah, I think those things are fair game. I use them in OER all the time.
She's a man paying her bills.
Yeah,
The Lumen content can be a little bit controversial in the OER world because of the definition that OER should be free. Well, Lumen makes some of its content free, but it also charges for some of its content. There was a kerfuffle on the OER listservs this week about an article that came out, and I don't remember whether it was Inside Higher Ed or Chronicle or EdSurge or which one, but there was an article about Lumen referring to it as free, which not all of it is. And to be fair, not all OpenStax content is free. If you want to buy a print copy, there's a charge for that. But to qualify as OER, there has to be a version that's free to access. And we can get into things like open washing. Since this is all licensed, I'll name a publisher, Cengage. They have scooped up a lot of the OpenStax content since it's licensed CC BY. That's legal to do. And they've repackaged it and they're now selling it back to students. So, that's no longer OER. The original source of the stuff was OER, but they're charging for it. So that's no longer OER. Yeah, it gets messy really fast. Let's see. Catherine says, what do you think about using an OER book, but then having an online homework system that there's a nominal charge for? If OpenStax does partner with a lot of tech companies to offer those low-cost homework systems. And I think if that's a nominal charge, I'm okay with that. Some of our faculty have done that, and they say, they're teaching high teaching loads, huge classes, and they really need that courseware to generate and grade tests. So I think the $100 courseware packages from publishers are problematic. And I've had students come to me and say, that's a real barrier to my success, that $100 courseware. But the low cost things like Lumen and OpenStax, I'm okay with those. I think it's important to think about the barriers to students, and students have said, anything over zero cost is going to be a barrier for somebody. So I think zero cost is ultimately the goal, but if it takes steps to get there, and we can lower the cost as we get there, I think it's all good. Let's see, Luke had a comment. I've actually used an OpenStax textbook to help my son with his high school chemistry class, where sadly and strangely, there seems to be no textbook offered. Ah, excellent. Oh, that's fantastic to hear that it was free and it helped with the class, even though it wasn't the assigned textbook. Fantastic.
Well, thank you again, Cheryl. This was so beneficial. Truly appreciate you taking time to share your expertise with the group here.
You're welcome. Yeah, and Megan has the PowerPoint deck, so I'm sure she'll be sharing that out, and feel free to reach out with other questions.
Yes, well, thank you again. Yeah, this was amazing. So we're going to take a few minutes to take a little break, because we do have an amazing faculty panel coming up after this. We have 5 faculty from 3 of our different institutions. So let's go on ahead and come back. I think we'll do what, 10, 25, 20, 27. So that gives us about 5 minutes. And then we'll go on ahead and jump into our next session. Okay, well, thank you again, Cheryl. Truly, truly appreciate this. This was amazing, and so many resources that we'll be able to share with the group.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Good to see you all.
Okay, we'll see everyone in just a couple minutes, just to stretch our legs and take a quick break.